Power does not remain reckless forever. Every great ruler reaches a moment when conquest must turn into control, and ambition must turn into strategy. For Sultan Orhan, the first true sultan of the Ottoman Empire, this moment defined his legacy. This was the middle age of his rule, when he stopped being just a conqueror and became an architect of empire. By the time Orhan had secured Bursa as his capital, defeated major Byzantine resistance in Anatolia, and stabilized his borders, the Ottomans were no longer a fragile frontier state. They were something new, something unfamiliar, something dangerous. They were organized, they were disciplined, and they were learning how to rule. But ruling is far more difficult than conquering. In the early years, Orhan had focused on survival, on expansion, on legitimacy. But now, he faced a different challenge. How do you keep what you have taken? How do you make people stay loyal? How do you turn victory into permanence? This was the phase where Orhan truly became a statesman. He understood that an empire cannot be built on fear alone. Fear fades, but systems endure. So he began to strengthen the internal structure of his state. He formalized courts, expanded administrative offices, he standardized taxation, made governance predictable. Predictability is power. People do not rebel when life becomes stable. They rebel when it becomes uncertain. Orhan allowed local traditions to survive. Christians kept their churches. Greeks kept their customs. Armenians kept their communities. He did not try to erase identity. He managed it. This made Ottoman rule feel less like occupation and more like authority. That difference mattered. While other rulers crushed culture, Orhan absorbed them. Absorption lasts longer than force. During this middle phase of his reign, Orhan focused heavily on the economy. Trade routes were protected, markets expanded, cities grew. The Ottomans were no longer just warriors. They were merchants, builders, administrators, farmers, artisans. A society was forming. And societies are harder to destroy than armies. Orhan also refined the military during this period. He continued shaping a standing force loyal to the state, not to individual commanders. Soldiers were paid regularly. Discipline was enforced. Training was continuous. This was no longer a temporary army. It was permanent. And permanence is what turns states into empires. While others fought for glory, Orhan fought for continuity. He also understood something rare among medieval rulers. Diplomacy could be more powerful than war. He formed alliances, arranged political marriages, negotiated borders, and exploited rivalries among his enemies instead of fighting them directly. Why lose men in battle when you can win through patience? This was the era where Orhan began playing the long game, and the long game changed history. As the Byzantine Empire weakened, Orhan did not rush to destroy it. He allowed it to decay. He absorbed territory slowly. He isolated cities. He let time do what swords could not. This made the Ottomans look less like invaders and more like successors, and that perception mattered. People resist invaders. They accept replacements. This middle phase of Orhan's reign was not loud. There were no legendary conquests. No dramatic sieges remembered in songs, but it was the most transformative phase of all. Because this is when the Ottomans stopped being a rising power, became a stable one. And stability is more dangerous than ambition. Stability allows planning. Planning allows vision. Vision creates empires. It was also during this period that Orhan began preparing the next generation. He did not leave succession to chance. He trained his son Murad not just as a warrior but as a ruler. He exposed him to administration, diplomacy, and governance. This was not common. Most rulers raised sons to fight. Orhan raised his son to rule. The decision would echo through centuries. As the Ottomans grew, so did Orhan's reputation. It's not as a conqueror, but as a fair ruler, a balanced ruler, a patient ruler. This earned him something far more valuable than fear. It earned him legitimacy. Legitimacy is invisible power. It is the kind of power that does not need constant enforcement. People begin to believe you belong. And when people believe you belong, they stop questioning your presence. This middle age of Orhan's rule was the phase where the Ottomans became normalized, no longer shocking, no longer temporary, no longer fragile. They were now part of the political landscape. And once you become part of the landscape removing, it becomes nearly impossible. This is why Orhan's middle years mattered more than his early victories. Victory creates opportunity, but management creates destiny, and Orhan chose destiny. By the time he grew older, his role was no longer to conquer, it was to guide, to stabilize, to protect what had been built. He watched as the machine he had created began moving on its own. That is the sign of a true architect, when your system no longer needs you to survive, and that is what Orhan achieved. When he eventually passed away, he did not leave behind chaos. He left behind continuity, a functioning government, a disciplined army, a loyal population, a rising European foothold, and a son ready to expand it all. This is what most people do not understand about history. Empires are not built in their beginnings, are built in their middle. That is where they either collapse or become unstoppable. Orhan chose unstoppable. Because of that choice, the Ottomans would soon reshape the world. If you found this story powerful, tell me in the comment. Do you think the most important phase of leadership is the beginning, the middle, or the end?